I'm Abbey Esparza with Envato Tuts Plus, and in this guide, you'll learn how to use brush presets, create your very own brush from scratch, modify all of its properties, and play with both blend modes and pressure controls. We are covering the very basics of the brush tool today in this beginner's guide. Starting with, what is it? The brush tool is a primary painting tool. It works like a traditional drawing tool by applying color using strokes. It's located in the standard toolbar and its default shortcut is the letter B. Next up, the basic settings. Starting with brush tip. The brush tip settings allow you to modify the shape of the brush tool's tip. Here, you will also find two critical values. Size increases or decreases the size of the brush tip. The default shortcuts to increase or decrease are the left bracket key and the right bracket key. Alternatively, you can Control-Option-Click on a Mac or Alt-Right-Click and drag on Windows to change the shape dynamically. Then there is hardness. Hardness increases or decreases the brush tip's border strength. 0% means a soft border and 100% a precise border. Next, the brush blending modes. A blending mode is a way to change how a brush stroke interacts with the pixels behind the stroke. Let's take a look at just some of the more basic blending modes. First on the list is normal mode, which paints the color as is. Then there is dissolve mode, which adds some noise at the edge of the brushstroke. Behind mode paints behind an existing stroke, even if they are both on the same layer. And then there is clear mode. The clear blend mode turns the pixel you paint on transparent, much like the eraser tool. There are dozens of different blending modes, and while most of the names do an okay job of telling you what they may or may not do, your best bet is to just scroll through them and see them in action for yourself. Next up, opacity. The opacity value is a percentage of transparency. 100% means a full color stroke, while a smaller percentage indicates a more transparent stroke. Which brings us to flow. The flow setting controls the speed at which paint is laid down. Each pass of the brush over the same spot will build more and more paint. Unlike with opacity, you don't have to lift your brush, making it ideal for gradually building up things like color, light, and shadows. Moving on to the brushes panel. The brush panel is the place to create, edit, save, and load a particular brush behavior or brush preset. You can customize several things here like brush tip shape, scattering, opacity jitter, flow jitter, and much more. To show the brushes panel, go to Windows, Brushes. You'll also need to select the brush tool on the Tools panel to enable the brush preset options. Let's create just a quick bird silhouette brush to walk us through the basics. To start things off, find an image of some birds. I'll be using this 3D asset as it comes on a transparent background. I'll be downloading it as a .psd. Let's open the PSD file and delete the shadow layer. Next, let's go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and bring the lightness down to -100, filling it with black. Mask or completely erase all but a couple of the birds using either the eraser tool or layer masks. Now crop the image down to its exact pixel size by holding Ctrl and clicking on the bird's layer, and then hitting crop. With the accepted crop, go ahead and edit, define brush preset, and hit OK. Once you've created the tip shape, you will see it in the brushes panel. You can select the new brush and paint some spots to see how it looks before adding any extra settings. The first thing that you may want to customize is the brush tip. The size value is a measured pixel size of the brush tip. The Flip Axis checkboxes flip the tip on its respective axes, X or Y, horizontally or vertically. The angle value rotates the brush by the desired degrees. Roundness defines the elliptical roundness of the brush tip, where 100% is a perfect circle. Spacing is the percentage of space between images when you draw a stroke on a canvas using a mouse or a pen tablet. The larger the percentage, the bigger the distance. And again, you can edit the hardness value of the tip depending on the circumstances. If you create a brush tip from an image as we have here, then it will not work. Next up, shape dynamics. Shape dynamics enables several options to handle the randomness of size, angle, roundness, and axis values. The larger the percentage, the more random the result. You'll notice that many brush behaviors like jittering and scattering can be controlled by setting one of the options of the control dropdown. There are a few different control options that you can use. Off means no control will be applied. Pin pressure varies the brush diameter using the pin pressure values provided by an external device, like a graphics tablet. Tilt and stylus wheel work the same way, but again using the hardware's tilt and stylus wheel values. These values do not work with a mouse. Next up, scattering. Scattering determines the amount and placement of brush marks in a stroke. The higher the scattering percentage, the more distribution of marks. The Both Axis checkbox enables scattering in both the X and Y axis. Deselecting this option means that the scattering will be perpendicular to the stroke's direction. Count slider specifies the number of brush marks laid at any one time, so a large number means many marks will be placed at once versus just one. Count jitter adds some randomness to the number of marks on a stroke. Sometimes it may place one, while other times it will put more, depending on how high the count jitter value is set. On to color dynamics. This option controls how the color of paint changes across a stroke. The way it works is pretty simple. It just adds some random color marks in a range between both background and foreground colors. The jitter percentage defines the randomness between the colors themselves. The hue jitter controls the difference between the front color hue and the foreground color hue. The larger the percentage, the larger the difference in color. Saturation jitter defines a percentage by which the saturation of a stroke varies between, again, foreground and background colors. Brightness jitter is pretty much the same as the previous, but this works over the brightness value. Finally, purity. Purity increases or decreases the overall saturation of the color. Even more dynamics. There are a few more dynamics on the list. Noise will add some noise at the borders of the brush's mark. Wet edges creates an illusion of watercolor painting, where the stroke borders seem darker than the center. Build-up simulates traditional airbrushing, so a long press of the mouse means a bigger mark. The build-up option corresponds to the airbrush option in the options bar, found here. Smoothing is useful when you're painting in a rush, as it produces smoother curves in a brush's stroke. Great when you're drawing with a mouse. This can also be found in the upper options bar, right here. Create a new brush preset. After modifying the brush options, you can easily save it by clicking the Create New Brush icon, found on the Brush Settings panel, bottom right-hand side. Make sure Include Tool Settings is checked, naming the brush, and then hit OK. Your new brush will now appear in the Brushes panel, settings intact. Save and load brushes. So to keep your custom brushes safe or even share them, go ahead and click Export Selected Brushes in the Brushes panel to export as an ABR file. To load a previously saved or downloaded brush library, click on Import Brushes in the Brushes panel menu. Besides that, you can also right-click Delete Brushes to delete a single brush or a whole group of brushes. And finally, you can append default brushes to bring back all of Photoshop's pre-installed brush groups. And there you have it. The brush tool's very basics, a staple in any Photoshop user's tool bag. We are just scratching the surface here. Sometimes the best way to learn a tool is simply by playing. So if you're looking to learn even more Photoshop tips and tricks, why not check out some of the other excellent videos that Envato Tuts Plus has to offer. If you like this video and would like to see more, consider giving us a like and even subscribing if you haven't already. And don't forget to click the little bell icon to be notified of all new videos, including tips, tricks, and tutorials. Happy designing, see you next time.